Alan, great to have you on the Construction ESOP Collective.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. Appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, no, it's great. And so a little bit of background for our audience. It's Alan Starks. He's our head of surety and bonding at Christensen Group Insurance. So a teammate of mine, so I'm a little biased, but I think you're the best in the business. And I'd like to give the audience just like a 10,000 foot overview of, who you are, why you're at Christensen Group, and why you're passionate about surety and bonding for our ESOP contractors.
Absolutely. So like Chuck said, Alan Starks, I'm the Senior Vice President, Surety Practice Leader here at Christensen Group in our Eden Prairie office. I joined Christensen Group about 5 years ago in the spring of 2021 after the agency that I was at had some transitions and we all became free agents. I was, by a lot of dumb luck in my life, I happened to own my own book at that time and connected with Charlie. Charlie was looking to start a surety practice, and I happened to have a bolt-on surety practice at that time that was able to come in, and that's why I'm at Christensen Group. The value of the ESOP that Charlie presented me was one of the big factors of doing that. Been in the business since 2003. My father got me into it at that time. I didn't know what I was doing, but back in those times, surety was pretty easy, and I just saw that there was a lot of golf and beer drinking going on in the surety business. I said, as a 27-year-old kid, I said, this seems like a great job. And then 2008 came and learned that we actually had to really roll up our sleeves and do a lot of work in the business. But so I've been doing it for 23-ish years now. Since we've been at Christensen Group, we've built out the team. I brought my team from my prior agency with me. There was 3 of us in the department then, besides myself. Now, in the last year, we've added 2 more. So with the growth at CG, kind of us handling all the different offices and markets that we're in, we've had some growth. So we're able to put on a couple more employees and to allow me to spend more time with the clients, with the other producers here that bring us into deals and do more of that. So that's kind of the big overview. I guess we have, depending on the day, 18 to 20 different surety markets we're working with here. So we do get a broad view of the surety underwriter marketplace. From the construction side, the contractors work with, we've got a little bit of everything because we're based here in Eden Prairie. I brought a large book over with us. Most of our clients are in the Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota area. We have done surety work in the Kansas City, Texas, and Chicago offices as well, but we're still fairly, upper Midwest based from the large part of our book, pretty evenly split between our heavy highway and vertical contractors, trades in each side of those, things like that. So again, pretty spread out book, from some pretty large contractors in all the spaces doing, 300 to 400 million down to a mom and pop starting off a shop on day one that knew us through their prior employer, and we help them out from their first, couple $100,000 bond that they'll ever need. So, good view of the market. We don't handle some of the jumbos, but other than that, we see a little bit of everything here.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, I could vouch for the team. It's one of the best in the business, and I've been at some of the biggest brokers in the world, and you and your team, just the white glove service that you give every client, not just the jumbos, but down to the startups. It makes a big difference. And before we get into the specifics of, surety, ESOPs and all that, since we are unique in the sense that we are 100% ESOP owned since 2006, I'd like to, if you wouldn't mind, Alan, tell me what ESOP means to you and what it's done for you and your team, and maybe the difference it's made in servicing your clients.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back a little bit to the prior agency I was at. They were a partial ESOP, so I had what I thought was knowledge of an agency ESOP then. And then, so when I came over here and Charlie presented the ESOP, to me, it was a part of our decision to come here, but it was some other things that really drove the bus on what that was. And I said, yeah, the ESOP's great. But I'm coming here because of the value that we put of our clients here at Christensen Group, that we do, our 3 C's, our clients are one of the main things that we focus on here. But now after being here for 5 years and seeing how a well-run ESOP works, it's amazing what that provides to the team and all of us that work at Christensen Group. Having somebody like Charlie Christensen that runs that, and that's his passion, provides value to all of us in stability of our retirement and all the different things that it does, stability of the company, knowing that we don't have something coming from left field one day and we all are a member of a different organization that we didn't know was coming. So the stability, financial security is great. And I don't want to make light of the financial security that provides us, but it's stability across the board, knowing that we don't have one group of owner here that can make decisions that, you and I, Chuck, are equals and our support staff are equals in decision making in this agency is huge. And I think we feel that in the culture that we're all bought in. The bad example, the receptionist has just as much power as you and I do, Chuck. And I love that, that once they're, given their ESOP shares, they've been here a year, get ESOP shares. We're all the same here. We're all pulling the same direction. I don't know if you talk on your other podcast, but our ESOP party is just an absolute blast to see everybody that we work with every day. Again, this goes more to the financial side, getting a financial lift. Some people, if they've been here a long time, they're getting a lot more money than they ever thought they'd have in life in just 1 year in that lift. And that's really cool to see from, the agency across the board.
Yeah. It's hard to believe, but we're 2 weeks out from our annual ESOP gala. So I'm pumped for that. Well, thanks, Alan. So the next thing is I'd like to put the audience in your shoes when you're talking to a client or prospective client and they say, hey, Alan, you know what? We're looking to have an exit in the next, whether it be the next 5 years, 10 years, or maybe they're like, hey, we want out in the next year and we're thinking about going ESOP. I'd like to know what's the first few thoughts that you think about when you hear that.
Yeah, I'm going to change the question a little bit there, Chuck. When usually I get brought up in an exit strategy way before there's thoughts. It's, hey, 5 years from now, I want to exit. What's the story? What's the best ways to do that, Alan? And then it gets to what's their goals. So, if they're just looking for a financial transaction and get all the chips off the table, get a max and get some big, the dump truck full of cash coming in the door, most likely they're going to go the PE route. But we've had very few of my close clients go the PE route because most of them, when you sit and talk to this entrepreneur in my book and most of the CG book, I think in general, on the P&C side as well, is entrepreneurs that started the company either, a family member and they took it on and grew it or they founded it or whatever. When you talk to those business owners, they don't want the dump truck full of cash and to disappear off in the sunset and move to Florida and never think about their company again. And in construction, especially, these entrepreneurs have put their blood, sweat, and tears into it. So we start having these exit discussions. We're talking about legacy and all these different things that they want before we get to the financial piece of it. So when we sit down with somebody and say, yeah, I want to, when in retirement, I want to drive my grandkid over to the shop and kick some tires and have coffee with the guys and still be able to show up and have everybody know who we are. That's what the legacy they want is. And they want to see the name of their company driving down the road and point out to the grandkids that's us. That was what I did. And so when you have that mindset, then we start talking about whether we're transitioning to, family members, managers, next generation, one way, shape, or form, ESOP, what the next way to do it is. And, and it's hard to, especially if you don't have family involved, close family members, then you don't want to look like you're giving it to one or two, a handout to them. And that's where the ESOP conversation starts to make a ton of sense where, hey, these X amount of employees got me to where I am today. I want to transition to all of them. Let's look at the ESOP route. And so it's about the values, and you need to have a legacy transaction that wants to happen there because you are going to have a little bit different transaction than you would with the PE firm that just backs up the dump truck, dumps the money but they're going to change the name a year later and you're not welcome to come, sit in the shop with the mechanics and drink coffee and tell the stories you like to tell. So that's a big piece of it to me is you've got to have, the first steps is creating that mindset of what do you want the future to look like. And if you click, a lot of my clients think they want they're sitting drinking coffee with their other construction owners and, probably one of them had an ESOP or a PE transaction and they really want this. They want to be able to brag they got X amount of dollars. When you sit and break down with them what they're going to do with X amount of dollars is where they start to struggle. And where we usually turn into a legacy type transaction is these are guys that didn't live big lifestyles and, have put in every dollar back in the business. even if they had all the money in the world, they're probably not going to change their lifestyle. And so what means more to them? Being able to say that they got X and that, but what would they do with the money? Do they want to start, scholarship funds for their, legacy of their, do they want to give to the church? Do they want to give to an organization? Because the reality is they're going to have more money than they ever thought they needed. And now if we can go to the ESOP route and give them a really big, close to that same valuation and get the legacy piece to it, now that's when we get the ball to start rolling of what makes sense to that entrepreneur trying to look at the exit.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point as far as being able to go back to the shop, share that with the grandkids, go over with your dog. It's still, even though you sold the company within an ESOP, you're still part of it. To your point, Alan, I think you go PE, maybe you get a really hands off, but oftentimes it's their company. And after a year, 2 years, 3 years, that when the earnout's done, you may not be welcome back. And it's funny. I was at the NCEO conference 2 weeks ago, and on one of the panels, it was about M&A in the ESOP space. And they said, listen, we can't sell to PE because we won't be able to go to the grocery store, the local diner, because they were so prominent in their community. And so the legacy means so much more than just your own family to a lot of these contractors, as well as the construction business is so built around your employees. If you don't have good employees in a labor force, you don't have a company. And so I'm never going to argue for a founder or a multi-generational construction firm to take a haircut. It's their business to do with it as they please. But I think a lot of people are surprised when you go ESOP. You could get damn near close to the money you would ever need or want. And then there's a lot of legacy things that it solves that other exit strategies just can't.
It's a good point about the diner and stuff. It's like, my biggest clients with, employees, one of them, I'll remember this forever. I'd go into their office and they had whatever at the time, 350 employees in a small town. And when I'd ask how the year went, maybe it was a tougher year. He wouldn't tell me, he'd tell me what the P&L said. But he says, what's more important, Alan? I put food on 300 families' tables every day for the last year. And that's more important to me than what you're going to tell me, I did or didn't do right on my P&L. And like, again, those are the type of people that, tend to own construction companies and build them, is have that type of mindset. And then the ESOP, that's the type of guy that ESOP works perfect for, where he's just proud that he's providing a living for all these people in town.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. And so what about from the surety underwriter's point of view? So you're having this conversation with your clients or prospective clients, and you're part of the planning, you're integral in that process. But now we need to make sure that it's served up to the surety market to not have them get skittish or scared. Because, for a lot of our contractors, especially heavy civil, it's all, surety backed business. And so what are you doing from that standpoint to educate our clients, but also make sure that our underwriters really understand ESOP, and so it doesn't become a deal breaker or a big bump in the road for the contractors that are looking to go ESOP?
Yeah, and there's two pieces to this. And, kind of Surety 101 is that from a surety underwrite, surety is a indemnification product. It's not insurance. So if there's a loss, we look to have assets to indemnify the loss. So again, that's back surety forever. So when we're sureties underwriting a balance sheet, we want equity and working capital there to do it. By definition, when we do an ESOP transaction, that balance sheet's going to flip, and you're going to have negative equity because we're going to be using the multiples of book value. And however we get to the price, the sale price, is going to be on a multiple of something other than just pure book value. So we're going to create some negative equity in that transaction. So we have to show the surety that, and there has to be some support from the seller in this situation on the note. So we can subordinate that. There's probably some portion of the financing that's a bank financing and some that's a seller note. And if the seller is willing to leave some chips on the table in the form of that note, saying that they're not going to take that money out unless the surety is okay with it, then the surety is going to add that back to the balance sheet, create positive equity again here. And then the surety is going to have equity that we can provide a surety program based on that. Again, in our world, we're going to fight and say the working capital is more important than that equity, but we still have to be in a position that the surety has some assets that they can base their case on to go after. And so, as we'll get into more on this throughout the discussion here, Chuck, the one piece that we definitely want to educate the sellers on if they want to go ESOP is just like in a legacy type transaction to a next generation family or non, there's going to have to be some help from that seller. So they want to enter this transaction maybe a few years before they really want to have all their chips off the table, because they want to project when the chips are going to be off the table, and they're going to get all their the different risks that they have off the table. So if we want our risk off the table 5 or 7 years from now, we should probably start that legacy or continuity down to the next generation or into an ESOP. We should start that discussion sooner rather than later, so they can still hit their de-risking at the same time frame, or try and hit that goal at that same time frame.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And is there anything that you're discussing with our clients or prospects in terms of different financial metrics or ratios and so forth that you want them to uphold or start being able to have all their ducks in a row, so to speak, before we start talking to the surety underwriter?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest piece, especially if we're looking at a transaction of any type here, is making sure that working capital is going to be a strong working capital case. I mean, again, Surety 101 kind of is you want a 5% working capital case, or 20 times your working capital is your max aggregate program. So that's kind of the first number to start with. Because of that we've got some moving pieces on the equity, the subordination, or however we're going to work through again, every ESOP transaction is different. Well, what's seller note, what's bank, and what we have to work with there to create some equity through different metrics. The working capital is going to be a true number. We want to make sure that we're maintaining that. We're going to want the ESOP advisors, the banks, everybody giving us good pro forma numbers to say, hey, this working capital needs to be here. The next big number we're going to look at is a debt to worth number, especially if we're talking about our civil contractors, where they already have some leverage on that equipment, most likely, and making sure that debt to worth number doesn't really go above that 4 to 5 to 1 is kind of, or if we do go above that we've got a quick plan in place to bring it back down, that we don't have, plans to go out and acquire a bunch more new equipment that are heavily leveraged or whatever it may be that we can work through. Again, the equity numbers are one we can manufacture a little bit different through subordination and different other ways to do it, but we really want that working capital and debt to worth to still fit into the surety kind of 101 metrics, and probably be a little stronger than we'd normally want, because our equity case might not be where we would have it. And then put the game plan together of saying how we're going to get the equity to that normal standard metric, and then we can start kind of really ramping from there from the surety program.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And
so I guess to sum it up, Chuck, we're looking at working capital, equity, and your debt to worth. I mean, I would talk about a lot more surety metrics, but those are kind of the three big ones, I think, in any transaction we're going to do that we want to focus on to make sure that hopefully 2 out of 3 of those are really healthy to kind of overcome one that might be weakened by the transaction.
Well, and one of the big C's that surety underwriters are looking at is character. So I would argue that for everything we've already discussed in this podcast, character is being highlighted via the ownership choosing to go ESOP and caring about their employees and being able to be around in some shape or fashion to have an ongoing connection to the business. Because in a PE deal, outside of an earnout, if they sell and they vanish, a lot of times these owners are integral in the go forward basis of the business, having relationships with customers and the community and so forth. So for some of the perceived negatives with going ESOP as it pertains to surety, which I think those are in large part going away with the proper planning and communication, I would say one of the biggest obvious benefits would be that character piece of it in a sale.
I agree. You've got the character, the ownership, but you also, the chances of keeping your top managers around and foremen and superintendents and all the important pieces, it's much more likely in an ESOP transaction than in a PE transaction. Like you said earlier, the conference you're at, the guy said he didn't want to go to the supermarket anymore. Yeah, because all those guys are looking for a new job when the PE happens. They know that there's a change in culture. The positive of that, the ESOP transaction, is that, the character and the culture of the organization stays the same because we're not bringing in new blood, we're not bringing in new people. We're letting the people that are already there and made the seller successful. We're allowing them to run it. I mean, what more could we want as a surety underwriter to know that the exact same people are running the ship? We don't have some PE firm that could come in and grab a bunch of cash one day when the cash shows up to use it somewhere else. Like it's the top people that made it what it was for the last 20, 30 years that are taking over. In my mind, that's what I want in a transaction is knowing that the people that made it successful are still there. And again, we can't promise anything in an ESOP transaction, but it's a heck of a lot better chance they're sticking around than in a PE transaction.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And when you start, so we've kind of covered pretty well like our internal discussions with customers and prospects, getting them ready, making sure that their metrics and all those sorts of things are in line. Now let's cross the barrier into your conversations with our actual surety underwriters. What are a couple things that you would like ESOP contractors or prospective contractors looking to go ESOP? I'd like to inform them on what are we hearing from our underwriters in terms of questions they're asking, scrutiny they're putting on certain things, and so forth.
It's going to go to sophistication. If you're going to be doing an ESOP transaction, your accounting department, just to even get to that point, you're going to have to be a fairly sophisticated contractor to deal with, the valuations and all that, and to have. So your accounting department, it's putting together sophistication of the pro formas of the post-close day one. What does the balance sheet look like after the ESOP transaction? It's also then forecasting out, cash flow, all the debt service you have to pay. As we get down the road, the future obligations when as people retiring, we have to buy out their shares and repurchase obligations. But it's showing the sophistication that you can look forward and prove this out and risk, do some stress testing out to say, hey, if this happens and it's not the perfect year, we still got this covered. It's showing the underwriter that we have plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G for cash flow because number one, the cash is king in any business. And so it's showing the underwriter that, yeah, we're going to do this. Yes, the balance sheet looks a little different, but here's all the steps we've taken to show that this isn't riskier than we were before. And so I think the big key is transparency, communication, and then just being sophisticated enough to be able to put together all the projections they're going to want to see and show them that you've already stress tested them, show them that you've already have backup plans in place so that, again, if whatever it is, if you have a reduced bank line because of that we've got, that we've already had conversations with, for example, the seller and say, hey, if we need a backstop, are you willing to put $1 million back in for the short term to allow us some cash flow for a startup cost for a heavy civil contractor in the north here with seasonal, and we have a lot of startup costs. Are you willing to give us a short term, seller finance line of credit to get us up and running to mobilize for the year? It's getting way in front of, the surety underwriter is going to want to go, well, but what if this happens? If you can tell them what your plan for that already is, that's where you're going to get that conversation on a really good path when you sound like you've already thought through all the questions the underwriter told you.
100%. Yeah. If you could, I call it the 8-mile approach, right? If you could confront the objection before they even have it, it just goes so much more smoothly. And so that's more from the lens of going ESOP. What about, you touched on the ROs or repurchase obligations. You flip the balance sheet, you got a bunch of debt, but now in most cases, especially if you go 100% S Corp ESOP, you got no federal income tax. In most cases, you don't have state income tax. So you have all this excess cash flow to pay down the note and start really looking super profitable. But then you become a mature ESOP and fast forward 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years down the road. And some of the people that have been with you and have the benefit of the ESOP growing, now maybe they want to exit, retire, and you have these repurchase obligations. So a new financial stressor potentially, and you don't necessarily get to choose when people retire. And if in 2008 happens again, now you got this cyclical nature of the business, and that is a true peril. And so if you could talk us through how you get existing ESOP contractors ready to just not have, a bump in the road with surety as they're ongoing, going through the life cycle of the ESOP?
Yeah, great. I mean, great question. And moving to the mature phase, hopefully we've got good cash management through those good years, because really the reality is the repurchase obligations from a heavy cash standpoint aren't going to happen for 10 or 15 years down the road when you've got some built in, that equity of each individual shares have really grown, and we've got that. So now it's being a good steward of the ESOP. You and I get lucky enough to listen to Charlie talk around here, and I don't think we could ask for a better steward of our ESOP than Charlie here. But it's making sure that, for a heavy civil contract, we don't get yellow fever when 3 or 5 years into this, when we pay off. I guess we should talk a little bit. So there's kind of the cycle of the ESOP. You do it, you're debt heavy, you're leveraged. We're getting a lift because of the no taxes. And we've got the first 3 to 5 years that you're really focused on paying down that debt to delever that ESOP. And then that 5 to 10 or 12 year stretch is when the ESOP really starts kicking, and you're able to hold that free cash flow. And it's making sure that you utilize that extra cash in a good way, and you're not getting yellow fever. We want growth because the growth helps the ESOP. So taking a conservative growth trajectory, but not getting too crazy on that, eating up all that free cash flow that comes up after you've paid off the debt, and making sure that you're making smart growth decisions in that time and putting away cash in the right spot, usually good analytics to model when the ROs are going to be, going to come up. And again, knowing that sometimes you can't predict it. You might, if somebody can get run over by a bus one day, you can't predict that. Somebody could have a health issue, retire early, but making sure that you've got kind of the rainy day set aside for those ROs when necessary. But again, it's that sophistication. There's a sweet spot, I think, in the Contractors Go ESOP. You have to be at a size that you are going to create enough cash flow once the debt's paid off to be able to start squirreling some away of it and really be a steward of that, and make sure that everybody knows that cash has got, a future need for it. And we can't go run to a new market and take on some risky work that might have us have to claw back that cash until we get, that piggy bank set up for the repurchase obligations. Now we can get a little bit more risky when we've got that kind of put away, and that's healthy, and we know that we can cover our repurchase obligations in the future.
Yeah, no, I think that outlines it perfectly.
And again, being transparent with the surety and showing the surety, what analytics you're using to project your ROs and all the different things that are there. It's just it's being having that open, transparent relationship with your agent and the surety. I view surety relationships as a marriage. Most of my clients have been with their same surety for 30 years. You hope when you go through a transaction like this, you want to hopefully stay with the same surety that's seen you during the good years, that knows why you're a great candidate for an ESOP. Hopefully that surety and the underwriting team can back you on this, because that's going to give you a lot more rope. And again, that's where the marriage, and I preach this all the time to our clients, it's like any 20 or 30 year marriage. There's some ups and downs in that. And there's times that each one's mad at each other, and that's okay. This is one of those times like, hey, we've shown you for 20 years how outstanding we are. We want to do this to make us even better for the future. Will you buy into it? And if you've got that good relationship with your surety, they should be really open to this conversation. And even if maybe as a whole, they're not a big ESOP, a fan of ESOPs, if you're open with them and have them involved in the process, you might be able to get them behind you and have that same surety that's going to give you a little bit more capacity when you need it during right in the beginning phases of this, because they've known all the key people and all the other things on that. So I think that's where the other piece is believing, I stick to my guns, that I still think that, my biggest clients, a lot of them have with the same surety for 30 or 40 years. And we have our tough times. We talk about what it looks like on the grass next door. It's a little bit greener, but is it worth giving up the positives that we have with that long-term relationship with the surety?
Yeah, I think continuity of all business relationships, it's not to say you're not going to stress test them. You want to make sure that you're, competitive in the marketplace and no one's getting fat and happy. But to your point, everyone has ups and downs, both from the surety carrier, but also the contractors. And I think the best business relationships are the ones that both sides have gone through bumps and they've stuck it out. And then when the next bump happens, because it's going to happen at some point, they already know they could trust each other and they're willing to put their neck out on a limb versus just being transactional. And I think the ESOP sale it's so nuanced that if that's your approach, it'll be paid back in spades.
Yeah, and again, it's everything we kind of transparency early in the process with your agent and your legacy surety, your current surety is the big key to this, and bringing everybody in early to know what stress you might be looking at. Because again, your company, if you're a heavily bonded contractor, the value of the company is part of it's in the surety program. And if you sell it to whatever it may be, and there's no surety program left, it's not worth as much as it is if you sell it and there's a massive surety program in existence. And so that's one of the things that sellers have to get their head around a little bit, is that they probably are going to be part of the surety process between subordination of the note, maybe personally indemnifying, maybe on a limited part for a little bit. But that risk that they're still taking is getting them significant value in the sale price, because they're allowing that contractor to still have basically the existing surety program to create the profits and the cash flow they need to pay off the debt.
Right. No, 100%. And so we touched on, the more mature ESOP and repurchase obligations and some other stressors. A big topic in construction right now is just at a CFMA event yesterday on, M&A in the construction industry is, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so a big, powerful piece to a mature ESOP is all that tax-free cash. And they may want to go on an M&A spree and utilize that story of, hey, if we buy you, we're not going to, strip everything out of the company. We want to keep your employees and we want to give them the added benefit of being employee owners now. And then also helping grow the construction company, because that's a huge recruiting tool of, hey, all things being equal, you're an owner now, and we're going to pay you a similar wage for, concrete guys and gals in the field. That could be a tiebreaker. And so what are the surety implications for an ESOP-owned contractor that's now looking to go on, make an acquisition? Is there anything you could impart to, again, help empower them to get their surety house in order and then make the acquisition versus making the acquisition and then realizing that could...
We got to tell somebody about the acquisition we just made and build that in. And again, it's the transparency piece. It's making sure you're in the right spot, that you've gotten through deleveraging your ESOP transaction, that that's the first step. You probably don't want to go on an M&A tear until you've really taken care of the first piece of that and gotten the debt paid down from that piece. Talking to your agent and the surety, hey, if I do this, do I have the capacity from a surety side to add this on in general? And then again, making sure that your analytics are perfect, so you still got your cash set aside for the repurchase obligations. It's making sure you're sophisticated. You've got the right people in your accounting department that are really looking at all the different angles on this and showing your surety why this all makes sense, and that you're not putting too much stress on that balance sheet while you do this. Trying to build in a pro forma with, okay, we add this in, what does this provide from new cash flow for us from a profitability standpoint? So again, it kind of, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Transparency and openness and getting ahead of it, doing it, well before you make the transaction. It's never good in the surety space when you call your agent, or your agent calls a surety and says, oh, by the way, this just happened a week ago, and it's a big deal. If you say, you're leading up to it and everybody knows about it, it's like, oh, okay, they closed on that deal. We all know everything about it, whatever. We've already got all the pro formas as a non-event on the closing. So that's the key, is to make sure that you don't, sureties, we live in the surety world. We're still about 20 years in the past. We just don't like surprises. We still move pretty slow, and we don't like to get the phone call that something major happened on the balance sheet that nobody knew about leading up to it. So that's the big piece. It's just transparency and communication.
Yeah. It's not like a surprise birthday party that's good. Surprises in the surety world they don't. It's a bad word.
Surprise birthday parties and surety underwriters don't go well together. They like to, they got their day all planned out. They don't want anything throwing a loop in their day.
Correct. So I don't want it to sound like we're trying to pitch that ESOPs are the be all end all and the only way to go. I mean, ESOPs they're intricate decisions, and there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that have to be lined up, and it's just not right for every single contractor. So I'd like I'd like for you to touch on when in your opinion, just professionally as being part of an ESOP organization, but also from your seat of, the surety, when should a contractor either hit the brakes and say, hey, maybe we want to go ESOP, but we're just not ready for it? And then also, when is it like it's just probably not a right fit, and maybe don't go the ESOP route?
Yeah, I think one of the things we touched on a little bit earlier, but the big key to getting a green light to ESOP is that your management team is in place that's really strong, has a long runway. They're not all, not hate to pick on ages. They're not all 63 years old and looking to retire in 2, 3, 4 years. That we've got a runway of high level people that are, staggered ages that are going to be able to run this for the next 20 years. And we've kind of got those people identified. If you don't have great management, both financial, operational, in every different sector, and maybe you're missing one piece of that. That's fine. Every business has got their different pieces where maybe it's not clicking as good as you want it to. Maybe you want to tap the brakes until we find the right person to sit in that seat on the operations side or on the finance side or whatever it may be, and then say, okay, maybe we get the right person in that seat, and then we can kind of move forward with it a little bit more. I think that'd be making sure the pieces are in place from that side of it to know, because that's the underwriters. Number one, as a seller, you need this to be successful on the back end, because you are going to have some sort of seller's note or options, or however you want to, whatever terms the lawyers put into it, you're going to have some risk still there. And you want to make sure that you get that so you can get your full value out of the company. And secondly, that's what the surety people are looking at. Do we have the people in place that have been there for a while that know how to run this to keep it going the way it is? So if maybe you just had some key people retire and you've got some real green people there, maybe we tap the brakes and wait a couple of years and say, when these people have shown that they really are the right person there, we can move forward with this conversation. To your no-go one, if you're a little bit too cyclical in your P&L every year, and if you're in a business that you have too much ups and downs, and that you hit one year you hit 2 home runs, you make just a pile of cash, and the next year you might have a couple flunkers, and the next thing you know, you lose some money. You really want this kind of a real level cash flow for the ESOP to work. And I think you have to have some mass from it. You and I have kind of talked before. I think you want to be, making a couple $1 million of free cash flow a year, whether we call it EBITDA, however, whatever term we want to use on it. We want a couple $1 million of free cash flow that we can really get that lift from, like you said earlier, Chuck, not having to pay the corporate taxes and for the U.S. or possibly our state. That's, on $2 million, we're probably talking about, 800 grand-ish that we're creating in free cash flow. Now we got enough mass from a cash standpoint to start paying the attorneys, all the TPA costs, all the valuation, all the stuff that comes in an ESOP, where you're adding another line item on your P&L that you didn't have before, and we could absorb that and still move forward. So I think, or if maybe you're not quite there yet and you want to do the ESOP, maybe your focus for the next 2 or 3 years is kind of growing the business to get there, or understanding if we have a cyclical business because of the economy, just the economy in general, that your business, your top line goes like this, or, how do we maybe we look at another, try and diversify and fill in this gap here so we can be a little bit more consistent in that. If we're just in a risky type of operations that has some home runs and some clunker jobs every once in a while, that's the one that one's harder. How do you, maybe we try and get our, dive into our estimating to say, how do we try and get rid of some of these more clunker jobs and bring that up so we can try and level it out. Now, in some industries, it's just not possible. You're going to have the home runs and the clunkers. I mean, that's the risk reward basis, and that's why there's the home runs, because there's clunkers in there. And maybe they're just not the perfect fit for an ESOP when they have years that they do tend to lose some money, and that you're not being able to really take advantage of that free cash flow.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? And it's redundant, but I think it's by design, and that's okay if something's redundant. Is planning, preparation, and transparency help ease the transaction of an ESOP. And so to that point, you have the home runs out the gate. There's one, I won't name drop them yet. Hopefully they'll come on the podcast, but there's one local to you, Alan. It's a $1 billion civil contractor. It just went ESOP. That's a home run. Great namesake, great business, great reputation. Then there's the clunkers that don't want to change the business model and don't force it. There's another avenue to to have a succession plan, and ESOP probably isn't a part of that. And then there's the stuff in the middle. And if they could have the right advisory team, from a surety broker to an attorney to, all the different advisors, the more time you have, the more benefit you could get ESOP ready, and get your bonding line ready to absorb an ESOP transaction. And so if you have 5-10 years of, hey, we're looking to make the transaction at that point, then you could start steering the ship in the right direction and smooth out any bumps than if you're doing a fire drill trying to sell, whether it's ESOP or otherwise, I don't care, in a year. You're just going to cause yourself a lot of unnecessary heartburn.
Yeah, I mean, I think succession planning in general needs to be thought of all the time. And, my dad, who was really brilliant, and he'd ask, what's, we always knew what the next succession plan was, but he always asked, well, what's the one after that? And I mean, and it could have been 25 years out, but he wants to get them thinking about it because, again, there's a lot of different ways to skin these cats. And again, decisions don't have to be locked in stone, but the more you can have people advising you on, this is your goal, we can help a lot in a 10 or 15-year process, if that's the goal, to help steer you little bits and ways in that direction. If you got 90 days to work on it, well, there's not much steering we can do in 90 days. It is what it is. You either get it done or you don't. That's kind of where we're at in a 90-day process. So the more we can get, again, and that's our job as your advisors on the surety side, is talking to you that we shouldn't be surprised when you are ready to exit. If we're surprised when you're ready to exit the business, we haven't done our job for you either, because that should be a constant communication with us for years and years and years leading up to it. Is, because again, before even the ESOPs were more popular, we had to worry about, life insurance. And, back when it was always just passed to the oldest son, right, wrong, or indifferent. Okay, well, how does that look? Is the tax man going to come after him and take all the cash of the business? So, as a surety advisor, it's no different now than it was when I started 23 years ago. We still need to know what the plan is to help you plan for it. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect, and it doesn't mean it's exactly how the plan happens, but we should have a plan in place so that we're here to help you make sure that there's a surety program after whatever the plan is happens.
100%. I mean, it's the old adage, begin with the end in mind. And it's not perfectly linear, but the more you could think about that in every business decision you make, and try to be intentional, you're going to thank your future self is going to thank your past self with that.
I mean, again, it's no different in any business, Chuck. Even you and I, we need to plan for, and Charlie's, talking to all the different guys here, kind of, not to say in my late 40s, what's your plan? And, how do we put the next person in place for you? And, what if Alan gets run over by a truck one day? I mean, every business should be thinking about these for their key people of what happens? There's too much between all of our ears that, is not in some system somewhere. And the businesses need to survive after, that person goes away. And so again, this is fun to talk about in the construction because there is nuance to it. But a lot of this it should be every single business from, top to bottom should be thinking about these things.
100%. Before we start to wrap up, is there any parting thoughts in terms of, from the surety underwriter perspective, anything else you want? Let's single out a prospective ESOP transaction for a mid-sized contractor. Is there anything else you want to impart on them to get them ready to make, a decision that's going to benefit them in the long run?
Yeah, I think a big key is just get everybody in the room, get your surety agent, get the lawyers, get your ESOP people that are talking about it. Once you made that decision, get us all in a room. So everybody's going to have, your tax guy, your banker, your surety guy, we're all going to have little different angles that is important to us. And let's make sure everything's on the table up front so that all your advisors, they're all pulling in the direction for you. We all work for you. Put us all in a room, let us get everything on the table. And then, before anything's put in writing, and let that lawyer listen to everybody that's trying to put the documentation together, listen to all the different pieces of it, and create open communication between all the different advisors you have in that process so that we can, again, if the banker needs to call me, that he or she's got the ability to call me without having you, give approval each time. And that makes any transaction much easier when we can just have full transparency across all the different parties that have a stake in it. And again, just the broken record we keep saying, transparency and being open with us will really help out that process all around.
Yeah, yeah. All the boats pointed in the right same direction, and having comms to each other with as far as the advisors is paramount in this
Yeah,
type of stuff.
absolutely.
Well, to end on a lighter note, Alan, like you said, and I know for me specifically, I never planned on being in insurance as a young boy. So I'm curious if you weren't in, leading our surety practice for Christensen Group, what would you be doing?
God, who knows? Flipping hamburgers, I guess, is about the only skill. Doing this for 23 years, I think it's the only skill I have is to talk about surety. Who knows the life would have sent me without this? I think even young, I worked for some of my contractors. I think somehow or another, I would have been in the construction space. Probably, who knows at what level, but I did like construction from a kid as a laborer, but, like the numbers side of it, maybe I would have been in the accounting department at a construction company. Who knows? Again, I didn't, I got into this pretty young and early in my working career. So I don't know much else, either that or flipping hamburgers somewhere, because I don't have any other skills in life.
Hey, flipping hamburgers on the beach is not nothing to scoff at, man.
I could handle it. I could handle it. Less,
Yeah.
It sounds like, especially now you say on the beach, that sounds pretty low stress. I could sit there and flip hamburgers on the beach.
There's something to be said about calling it quits and at the end of the day and not having it carry with you home. So I'm not going to
Exactly.
scoff at the beachfront hamburger flipping. So in our next life, well, Alan, really appreciate you coming on. Appreciate all the good work you do for our clients. How can people reach out to you if they want to pick your brain or just learn more?
I think the Christensen Group website's probably the best way to find me. If you get me there, I won't try and our email address is long and complicated here, and so I'm not going to repeat that. You'll find my profile on the Christensen Group website. All my contact info is there, and you can get a hold of Chuck and myself on that website and ask us any questions. Again, we're both here to help in any way we can.
Yep. Yeah. And you could always, I could always connect you. I mean, we're pretty close, Alan and I, so you could always come to me and then I'll connect the dots from there. But Alan, thanks again. Looking forward to seeing you at our ESOP share price reveal in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing you there, Chuck.
All right. We'll see you.